Well, good morning, Unitarian Universalists of Sarasota and Lakewood Ranch, and any visitors who are joining us this morning. I'm Beth Miller, one of the associate ministers here, and I welcome you to today's service, whether you're viewing us live now on Sunday morning or sometime later in the week when our services are recorded. In any case, welcome. If you are visiting us today, we're glad you're here and hope you'll come back. If you haven't already found it, take a look at the visitors page on our website, accessible from the home page. Follow the links to find lots of information about this church and about Unitarian Universalism. Sign up for our weekly newsletter called Contact and to receive email invitations to many of our weekly Zoom offerings. And if you have questions or want to talk to one of our ministers, our contact information is also on the homepage. Just scroll down to Pastoral Care and Connection. I am grateful to members of the worship team offering today's service. The Reverend Bud Friend Jones, my fellow associate minister who created today's service, will be giving the sermon. Catherine Bonner, our Director of Religious Education, is offering a time for all ages, and our musicians, Don Bryn and Robert Lischetti, and our masked choir members, Kathy Cyrus, Jan Dorsett, and Paul Lewis will offer music this morning. And of course, many thanks to our tech team, Klaus Obermeit and Doug Caldwell. And today is Klaus's birthday, so hold him in your thoughts today. Later in the service, we will have a hymn led by our mini masked choir for what would be the offertory music. Were we together here, our ushers would quietly pass the baskets among you during the music for your contributions. Well, as most of you know, we still need your contributions even though we can't pass the baskets. Instead, I encourage you to go on our website after the service and click on the virtual basket and throw something in to help us through this time of reduced income due to this pandemic and how long it's going on. So thank you very much for that. I have one special announcement this morning. The UUCS Arts Council is happy to present a new member artist of the month, Esther Jensen. You can see this exhibit by going to our church at the top of the homepage and then clicking on the link for the Arts Council. Esther's show is entitled Glass Creations. She says, "At the heart of my glass creations is a desire for honesty, harmony, structure, and a strong sense of physicality." You can also see this exhibit online by accessing it through the link in our newsletter, The Contact. And now, before we light the chalice, let's enjoy Don Bryn's playing Hunting Song from Songs Without Words by Mendelssohn. Thank you, Don. That was great. And now, as we light the chalice this morning, hear these words by the Reverend Scott Taylor. Come. Come with your joys, your curiosity, your hunger for hope, but bring, too, your broken heart, your cracked confidence, your ruptured relationships. Let this today be a place of repair. May the words spoken become webbing, weaving again a path back to wisdom, back to forgotten worth, back to a place of peace, excuse me, back to a place of peace now buried by all the striving, worry, and wounds. May the sounds circling in this space sweep you up like a stream whose currents long to carry you home. And may the common breath so sweetly shared between us remind you that loneliness eventually lifts, that we are tethered more tightly than in sometimes it seems, that together our hearts can mend and our world can be woven anew. Come, let us begin our worship as we light the chalice, especially honoring our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And now I think we have a brief video before we do the time for all ages. Nobody told me that. Never mind.
This week in our religious education Zoom lesson, we'll be honoring our Native American brothers and sisters and their spirituality, the interconnectedness of all beings with Mother Earth. I hope that each of you will honor our indigenous peoples tomorrow instead of Christopher Columbus, who started a chain of European explorers and exploiters who brought disease and decimation to so many indigenous peoples. So today, I would like to recount to you one of my favorite Native American tales. The story of the jumping mouse. Once there was a mouse. He was a busy mouse and searching everywhere, full of curiosity. One day, as he was exploring, he heard an odd sound, a sound like roaring. It was faint, but it was there. He scurried closer to the sound until it became a deafening roar. He climbed a tall green stalk and was astonished. It was a place of water. It was huge and breathtaking, deep and clear in places and murky in others. And sitting in a shallower place on top of a lily pad sat a green frog. "Hello, little brother," said the frog. "Welcome to the river." "Who are you?" asked the mouse. "And aren't you afraid of being that far out in the river?" "No," replied the frog, "I'm not afraid, because I have been given the gift to live both above and below and within the river. I, my brother, am the keeper of the water. Would you like some medicine power?" "Oh, yes, yes, please," said the mouse. "Then jump as high as you can, and you will have your medicine," said the frog. So the mouse crouched down and jumped as high as he could. And at the peak of his jump, he saw the sacred mountains off in the distance. He could hardly believe his eyes. And then, plop, he landed in the river. Well, frightened, the little mouse scrambled back to the shore and he screamed at the frog, "You tricked me!" "Wait, do not let fear and anger blind you. What did you see?" I saw the sacred mountains." "Well, you must go there to get the rest of your medicine power. Your new name is Jumping Mouse." So Jumping Mouse scurried back past his home to the edge of the prairies and looked up for eagles. The sky was full of so many spots, and each one was an eagle. But he was determined to get to the sacred mountains, so he gathered his courage and he ran just as fast as he could onto the prairie. He could feel the shadows of the spots on his back as he ran. Finally, he ran into a blackberry bramble. After he could no longer hear the pounding of his own heart, Jumping Mouse heard a very heavy breathing. He quickly investigated the sound and found a great mound of black hair with horns. It was a great buffalo. "Hello, my brother," said the buffalo. "Thank you for visiting me." "Hello, great being," said the Jumping Mouse. "Why are you lying here?" "I am sick and dying," said the buffalo, "and my medicine has told me that only the eye of a mouse can heal me. But, little brother, there is no such thing as a mouse." Well, Jumping Mouse scooted away in shock. "One of my eyes," he thought, "one of my tiny eyes." But as the buffalo's breathing became harder and slower, Jumping Mouse knew that the great being would die without his help. So he came up to the buffalo and he spoke in his ear. "I am a mouse and you are a great being. I cannot let you die. I have 2 eyes, so you can have one of them." And as he said it, Jumping Mouse's eyes flew out of his head and the buffalo was made whole. The buffalo jumped up and shook his shaggy mane. "Thank you, my little brother. I know of your quest to the sacred mountains, and if you will run under my belly, I will take you there, and the eagle shall not see you." So Jumping Mouse ran under the buffalo, secure and hidden from the spots. But with only one eye, it was very frightening. The buffalo's great hooves shook the whole world each time he took a step. At last the buffalo stopped. "This is where I must leave you, little brother," he said. "I now must return to the prairie. You can always find me there." "Thank you," said Jumping Mouse, looking around at his new surroundings. The land started to rise, inching to the sacred mountains still in the distance. As he journeyed further, Jumping Mouse came upon a gray wolf who was just lying there doing absolutely nothing. "Hello, Brother Wolf," Jumping Mouse said. The wolf's ears became alert and his eyes showed. "Wolf! Wolf! Yes, that's who I am. That's what I am. I'm a wolf." But soon the wolf's mind dimmed, and it was not long before he sat quietly again, just staring. Jumping Mouse reminded him again and again, but the wolf would soon forget. "Such a great being," said Jumping Mouse, "but he has no memory." Jumping Mouse sat quietly next to the wolf, closed his eyes, and listened to his heart. After a while, Jumping Mouse looked up at the wolf and said, "Brother Wolf?" "Wolf! Wolf!" said the wolf. "Please, Brother Wolf, listen to me. I know how to cure you. It is one of my eyes." And as he spoke the words, Jumping Mouse's eye flew out of his head and the wolf was made whole. Tears fell down the wolf's cheek, though Jumping Mouse could not see them. "You are a great brother," said the wolf, "for now I have my memory, but now you are blind. I am the guide into the sacred mountains, and I will take you there and to the great medicine lake. It is the most beautiful lake, and all the world is reflected there." As they reached the beautiful lake, Wolf described the beauty of the world around them, then gently told Jumping Mouse, "I must leave you here so that I may guide others to this sacred ground, but I will stay with you as long as you like." And though Jumping Mouse was afraid to be left alone, he knew that the wolf's job was very important, so he thanked him politely, and he sat there trembling in fear. There was no use running, for he was blind. He soon felt a shadow on his back and the piercing cry of an eagle. He braced himself for the shock and immediately fell asleep when the eagle took him. When Jumping Mouse woke up, he was disoriented, but full of excitement because he could see colors again. He then heard a voice ask, "Do you want some medicine? Then jump as high as you can." Well, Jumping Mouse did, and the wind caught him and carried him higher. "Don't be afraid," the voice called to him. "Hang on to the wind and trust." Well, Jumping Mouse let go of his fear and opened his eyes. He saw frogs sitting on a lily pad in the beautiful lake. "You have a new name," he called. "You are Eagle." May we reflect on the selflessness and the courage of Jumping Mouse and how we are all part of this circle of life as we sing hymn number 74 on the dusty earth drum.
Thank you. What a beautiful service we've had so far. The story was beautiful. The music is beautiful. Thank you so much. Now we engage in a time of centering here in our church. I'm going to read a brief meditation. That will be followed by silence. Silence here, silence in your home. And then we will sing together Spirit of Life. And we invite you to join us at that point too. What I'm going to read to you was written by Lynn Unger, and it was written about our situation. Pandemic. It's called Pandemic. What if you thought of it as Jews consider the Sabbath the most sacred of times? Cease from travel. Cease from buying and selling. Give up just for now on trying to make the world different than it is. Sing, pray, touch only those to whom you commit your life. Center down. And when your body has become still, reach out with your heart. Know that we are connected in ways that are terrifying and beautiful. You can hardly deny it now. Know that our lives are in one another's hands. Surely that has become clear. Do not reach out your hands. Reach out your hearts. Reach out your words. Reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise this world your love, for better, for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. Let us be in silence.
Today's reading is a passage from The Judgment of the Birds by Loren Eiseley in his book, The Immense Journey. It was a late hour on a cold, wind-bitten autumn day when I climbed a great hill, spined like a dinosaur's back, and tried to take my bearings. The tumbled waste fell away in the waves in all directions. Blue air was darkening into purple along the bases of the hills. I shifted my knapsack, heavy with the petrified bones of long-vanished creatures, and studied my compass. I wanted to be out of there by nightfall, and already the sun was going sullenly down in the west. It was then that I saw the flight coming on. It was moving like a little close-knit body of black specks that danced and darted and closed again. It was pouring from the north and heading toward me with the undeviating relentlessness of a compass needle. It streamed through the shadows, rising out of monstrous gorges. It rushed over towering pinnacles in the red light of the sun, or momentarily sank from sight with their shade. Across that desert of eroding clay and wind-worn stone, they came with a faint, wild twittering that filled all the air about me as those tiny, living bullets hurtled past into the night. It may not strike you as a marvel. It would not, perhaps, unless you stood in the middle of a dead world at sunset. But that was where I stood. 50 million years lay under my feet. 50 million years of bellowing monsters moving in a green world, now gone so utterly that its very light was traveling on the farther edges of space. I had lifted a fistful of that ground. I held it while that wild flight of sound-bound warblers hurtled over me into the oncoming dark. There went phosphorus. There went iron. There went carbon. There beat the calcium in those hurrying wings. Alone, on a dead planet, I watched that incredible miracle speeding past. It ran by some true compass over field and wasteland. It cried its individual ecstasies into the air until the gullies rang. It swerved like a single body. It knew itself, and lonely, it bunched close in the racing darkness, its individual entities feeling about them, rising night. I dropped my fistful of earth. I heard it roll inanimate back into the gully at the base of the hill. Iron, carbon, the chemicals of life. Like people from those wild tribes who had haunted these hills before me seeking visions, I made my sign to the great darkness. It was not a mocking sign, and I was not mocked. As I walked into my camp late that night, one man, rousing from his blankets beside the fire, asked Sleepy, "What did you see?" "I think a miracle," I said softly, but I said it to myself. Behind me, that vast waste begun to glow under the rising moon. There ends the reading. Please enjoy our offertory music, number 1074, Turn the World Around.
From the fire, living in the fire, mountain fire, make the sunlight turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. We are of the spirit, truly of the spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. Oh, so is life but a walk, so is life. Whoa, so is life but a walk, so is life. Whoa, so is life but a walk, so is life. Whoa, so is life but a walk, so is life.
I hope you were dancing to that. That's. Thank you. Thank you. Music's been good. Beth is such a beautiful reader. And that Lauren Isley passage is so meaningful to me. Thank you so much for how well you did that. Catherine's such a good storyteller. We're having a good time here, people. Hope you are at home as well. We are talking about relationships now. Month of October, that's the theme. I remember as a child, they used to say, well, the proper order is God, others, and self. Did any of you have that lesson? That was kind of a standard lesson. God first, others second, self last. And that was a kind of good advice, good guiding advice, I think, in today's world. That wouldn't hurt a lot of people to look at. But I want to suggest to you there may be another basic relationship that was left out of that formula, and one that is really fundamental. And I call it the mother lode of all relationships, that source from which we can begin to straighten out a lot of the relationships that are somewhat jangling right now, shall we say. Tomorrow is a national holiday. It's always been Columbus Day, but beginning 30 years ago at Mayflower Church in Minneapolis and other churches as well, we began to observe it as Indigenous Peoples Day. And we had, I remember 30 years ago, we had a shaman from one of the reservations in the community to come and speak to us. And I remember because Mayflower people were like by the clock. They had to be out of the service by noon because the Vikings were going to play. In fact, I think they would even give the minister tickets to make sure they would get out in time to the game. And so it was interesting to me because actually he went by the name Porky White. That was the name he went by. Really wonderful man. When he came and bespoke, the service went on from 11 to 12, 12:15, 12:30, quarter to 1, 1 o'clock, 1:15, and everybody in the congregation was riveted. They sat and they really did appreciate all that was happening there. It's just interesting to watch them. And he actually brought his pipe and decided to do a ceremony, and he had all hundreds of people lined up in a circle, and he went around and blessed each one. It was pretty amazing. But it was a celebration of indigenous peoples, and I've always thought that that's a good thing to do on this weekend. And that's finally our president has been the first president in the country to commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day. That's good. That's good that we're doing it because we're just beginning to acknowledge both the horrible pain that community has endured and also the wisdom that is embedded there that we maybe can tap and need to tap now. And I want to suggest to you something about a Native American perspective on relationships that will help us. To do that, I'm going to be relying on two speakers. I heard them speak this 2 weeks ago at Rothko Chapel. It was a Zoom conference. It was called American Indian Worldview and the Concept of Rights. And I have the link to that. And after this sermon, if you're interested in the links, send me an email or a message, me on Facebook or however you want to contact me, and I'll send you the link and you can watch it. But it's a fascinating, probing conversation between two Native Americans. One is Tink Tinker. Tink Tinker is a member of the Osage Nation. He is a spiritual leader in Colorado, emeritus professor of American Indian cultures and religious traditions at Iliff School of Theology in Denver. He has many books, and they include Spirit and Resistance, American Indian Liberation and Political Theology, Missionary Conquest, the Gospel, and Native American Genocide. And then Dina Gilio Whitaker. She is with the Colville Confederated Tribes, and she teaches American Indian Studies at California State University. Also has written a number of books, most recently, As Long as Grass Grows, The Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock. And she's currently working on a new book under the working title of Illegitimate Nation, Privilege, Race, and Accountability in the U.S. Settler State. These are pretty good books and really worth spending some time with. So I want to what they said in that will inform a great deal of what I have to say in the talk today. But I'm going to start with a subject that I don't think Unitarians talk a lot about, and that is original sin. Do you? It's not something that gets into the pulpit every Sunday. Original sin. I mean, one view is that Eve gave Adam an apple, remember? And he ate it, and she ate it, and the serpent had, you know the story, right? And that's the story I grew up with. That's original sin. And if she hadn't done that, and if he hadn't taken a bite, the whole world would be so much better. But because they did that, we are all in need of salvation. Now, another view that I also was raised with is that the original sin is sex. It's just sex. It's how we were conceived, how we were brought into this earth, this world. There's no way that you can be a person on the planet and not have been tainted by the sin of sex. Jesus, maybe not, according to some doctrines, because of the virgin birth. But my favorite cartoon, and I've had this for years and years and years, is this cartoon that appeared in the New Yorker, in which St. Peter is saying to somebody who poked his head up, "Oh, you must have worried yourself to death. That wasn't a sin either." We think so many things are sins. And I grew up in an environment where that, in fact, was the case. So many things were sins, which really meant that your mother would see you, and that would do it. But the reason I bring it up here is that there's a current debate in America about what is the original sin. And some say it's slavery. There's that whole 1619 wonderful teaching that we all need to look at, that African slavery, the enslavement of other human beings, is the original sin of this country, and one that we must repent of, we must overcome. Native Americans would challenge that a bit and say, yes, truly that is an original sin, but another is the Native American genocide. Across the continent, across the Americas, the genocide of indigenous peoples by European settlers. So that's the original sin. But Tink Tinker in this interview said, yes, but there's an even prior sin to those two, and that is the sin of property. Did you ever think of that? Property itself, he said, is the root of sin. Property. And to explain that, he talks about the Papal Bull of 1493, which we kind of talk about as the doctrine of discovery. The doctrine of discovery said that, and it was kind of at the beginning of international law. It's when we were beginning to think about, we had the nations of Europe were out exploring the world. They were beginning to put their claims on this land and that land. And the Pope issued a bull, a statement saying essentially any land that is not inhabited by Christians is available. It's available for European discovery, Spanish European discovery. And any people who live in that land, and if they are not Christian, then they have no right to that land. And they are savages. They have no rights at all, as a matter of fact. And you are justified in taking their land, and you are justified in enslaving that whole population. This was the papal doctrine of 1493. The idea that property, of how we determine who gets to own what. Treating the land as property as opposed to having a sacred relationship with the land. This is where Tinker is taking us. Native Americans, he said, for them this whole idea of property is anathema. And I have Native American friends. I have friends in Minnesota. They bought a house, and they moved into their own house, and it was the first time, and they were happy to have their house. And then I watched over a period of weeks that they just were not comfortable, and finally they sold the house because they just didn't believe you could own this earth, because this earth is a sacred presence. It's not to be owned, not to be used. It's just not to be owned. I remember so many wonderful summer camps with the church youth groups, with the Boy Scouts, with others, and always we would recite Psalm 8. O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name in all the earth. And it's this beautiful affirmation of God's greatness. And then what is man, or what are we, that you would make us a little lower than the angels or than God? So, I mean, it was a wonderful statement, and I remember loving that, and that was my little psalm. But if you read on in Psalm 8, it's very short and very beautiful. The next thing is that you have given us, dominion over everything. What are we? That you would give us dominion over everything. Dominion, domination over everything. Over animals, over plants, over land. We are dominant. This is sinful, I think. We use this in our minds. We are dominant, even to the point where I have friends who can't go home to their small towns in Kentucky because the towns are not there anymore. They've been bulldozed. The mountain tops have been bulldozed so that we could get to the coal that's underneath. This is so opposite the Native American idea that the land is sacred. All land is sacred. The land is grandmother. The land is our grandmother. And Tinker talks about how painful it is for him to watch how we rip into the flesh of our grandmother over and over and over again. And I remember driving out side of Atlanta and looking at a mountainside where they had carved a sculpture into a rock. And I was with a Cherokee woman, and she said, she started crying. And she said, look what they've done to our mountain. Sacred space, something sacred. You've heard this from others as well. Of course, This whole concept then leads to Darwin, who did begin to see us as part of nature, which is good, part and parcel of nature, not necessarily, well, above it. Yes, we are in Darwin, right? There's an evolutionary process that leads finally to us. And we are at the top of the food chain, and we are in charge. Well, there's another worldview that I'm embracing today and that I'm bringing to us that I think we need to think about. And it's in this cute little quotation that I put out on the web page. Don't forget to drink water and get sun, because you are basically a houseplant with complicated emotions. I like that. Yeah? Think of yourself that way. Or as Aubrey Marcus said, he's a nutritional and wellness guru. He wrote, listen to this, you are comprised of 84 minerals, 23 elements, 8 gallons of water spread across 38 trillion cells. You have been built up from nothing by the spare parts of the earth you have consumed, according to a set of instructions hidden in a double helix and small enough to be carried by a sperm. You are recycled butterflies, plants, rocks, streams, firewood, wolf fur, shark teeth, broken down to their smallest parts and rebuilt into our planet's most complex living thing. You are not living on Earth. You are Earth. Oh. What does it mean, you are Earth? What does it mean if Earth is our relative, our grandmother? What does it mean if our grandmother is speaking to us today? What is she saying? I think a lot of people are asking this question, aren't they? We see the fires out west. We see the storms sweeping into Louisiana, Alabama, Florida sometimes. We see the flooding. Is our grandmother trying to say something to her grandchildren? Possibly. And what would that be? Dr. Gillia Whitaker said it this way. She said, what is COVID-19 trying to tell us? What is it demonstrating to us? It has never been clearer, she said, what a country built on rugged individualism brings us. It brings us to our knees. Rugged individualism brings us to our knees. So what is required today, and Lord have mercy, it's really hard. Really, really hard. This is not an easy sermon. It's a paradigm shift from domination to deep cooperation, from exploitation to deep appreciation, from the settler mind to a relational mind. In law, in practice as well as in theory, individualist versus communityist. We need to move away from rugged individualism to a communityist sensitivity to the reality that we are all one together. So then Tink and ask the question, who has rights? And why do I, Native American, have to go to your courts to discover this? Who has rights? To whom do we listen? Do animals have rights? Do plants have rights? Who speaks for them? How are we going to build a relational community with the earth and all that is on it in a way that's respectful, Then they go on to say other things we need to ask. We need to do a really deep self-examination and rebalance the scales of justice and opportunity to include these relationships that we've ignored in the past. We need to ask questions like, how have we benefited from stolen land? From stolen labor? From genocide? How are we complicit? How can we make decisions that are fundamentally against the very worldview we were raised with? These are difficult conversations about land and property and reparations and relationships. How can we disrupt our everydayness? What if it isn't convenient? What or who will we accept as our teachers? We need to work, I believe, and rapidly at a restoring of the proper balances of the earth. Because that relationship we have with earth is the mother lode of all relationships. And if we can't get that piece straight, we can't get, I think, in the end, any relationship really straight. It is the principal vein. It is the source of the ore of good relationships. And we need to pay good remedial attention to that right away. Well, to end this, I'd like to suggest that one voice who is speaking to us and can lead us in one piece of the direction here is Mary Oliver. Mary Oliver is a poet that everybody likes and everybody reads, and she lived her life in a kind of harmonious relationship, an appreciative relationship with nature. She said that we were made for wonder, beauty, and grace. I think of that. Most people think we're made to make money. We're made to have a good job. We're made to have a good home. We're made for this. We're made for that. When we build our educational systems now, what do we want to teach kids? How to get a job. Don't take that major. It's not going to help you. She says we are made for wonder, beauty, and grace. Oh, that's different, isn't it? That's important. Our true work, she says, listen, our true work is loving the world. Oh my, embrace it, love it. She said, pay attention, be astonished, tell about it. And then she asked the question, which I think is profound. What does it mean that the world is so beautiful? And it is, isn't it? Look at a flower and another flower and another flower. They're all incredibly unique and uniquely beautiful. What does that mean? Darwin would give you one answer. Mary Oliver will give you another. And she says, what do I do about it? And then finally, and I will close with this question, what is the gift that I bring to the world? Amen. Yes, what's the hymn?
Break not the circle.
Break not the circle. Perfect.
Break not
Thank you, Bud, for that inspiring sermon. Difficult subject, but so important in today's world. Our closing words are appropriately from Chief Seattle, who said, "Treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It was loaned to you by your children. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children." We extinguish the flame, but carry its light within us. May it guide us through this week ahead. So may it be. Amen.